Alina Kareem was the girl no one noticed, until she became the most feared name in the underworld, and Zayan Malik, the man she once loved, vanished without a trace. Alina Kareem lived in a part of the city that people often forgot existed. The streets were narrow and uneven, lined with old houses whose paint had faded under years of heat and dust. Nothing ever seemed to change there. Days passed quietly, blending into one another, and for most people, that kind of life felt safe. For Alina, it felt like being trapped inside a world that didn't notice her. She was known as the girl who kept to herself. At school, she sat in the back of the classroom, rarely speaking unless she was asked a direct question. Even then, her voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if she feared being heard too clearly. Teachers described her as well-behaved but distant. Classmates barely remembered her name. It was as if she existed in the same space as everyone else, yet remained invisible at home. Things were not much different. The house felt empty even when someone was inside it. Her mother worked long hours at a small clinic across town, leaving early in the morning and returning late at night, exhausted and silent. Conversations were short and practical, revolving around daily needs rather than emotions. There was no warmth, no laughter, just a routine that neither of them questioned anymore. Her father had been gone for years. No one spoke about him. There were no pictures left in the house, no stories shared. It was as if he had never existed, erased from their lives without explanation. But Alina remembered enough to feel the absence. It lingered in quiet moments, in the empty chair at the table, in the silence that filled the house every evening. Most nights, Alina found herself sitting by the window in her small room, watching the street below. She observed people passing by, families returning home, children playing, neighbors talking. It all felt distant, like she was watching a life she could never be part of. The outside world moved forward, full of noise and connection, while her own life remained still. She didn't have close friends. Attempts to connect with others had slowly faded over time, replaced by a quiet acceptance of her solitude. It wasn't that she didn't want to belong. It was that she no longer believed she could. There was a certain predictability to her life, a routine that rarely broke. That was why the moment everything changed felt so strange, almost unreal. It began with a presence she couldn't ignore. At first, it was just a feeling, like being watched, not in a way that caused immediate fear, but enough to make her aware of something different. Then, she started noticing him. He appeared in places where he didn't belong to her world. Standing at a distance, leaning against a car or walking slowly through streets where strangers rarely came, he didn't blend in. There was something about him that disrupted the quiet balance of the neighborhood. People reacted to him without speaking. Conversations stopped when he passed. Eyes lowered, doors closed a little quicker. It was subtle but impossible to miss. Alina didn't understand why, but she couldn't stop noticing him. For the first time in a long while, something had broken her routine. Something unfamiliar had entered her carefully predictable life, and deep down, without fully realizing it, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt seen. That single feeling, quiet but powerful, was enough to change everything that came next. Zayan Malik's presence in Alina's life did not arrive all at once. It grew slowly, like a shadow stretching longer with each passing day. What began as distant observation turned into brief encounters, and those encounters soon became a regular part of her routine. For someone who had spent years feeling invisible, the attention felt unfamiliar, almost unreal at first. Nothing about him seemed openly dangerous. He carried himself with calm confidence, never raising his voice, never showing urgency. His movements were controlled, his expressions unreadable. There was a quiet authority in the way he existed, as if the world around him adjusted without needing to be told. Alina didn't understand it, but she felt it. He noticed things about her that no one else ever had. The way she walked alone, the way she avoided eye contact, the way she seemed detached from everything around her. That silent recognition created a connection she had never experienced before. It wasn't loud or emotional, but it was enough to pull her closer. Her life began to shift in small ways. The long evenings she once spent alone by the window were replaced with moments outside, stepping into parts of the city she had never explored. The quiet streets she knew so well were replaced by unfamiliar places filled with movement and hidden energy. It felt like she had crossed into a different world, one that existed just beneath the surface of the ordinary. With time, the changes became more visible. Simple clothes she used to wear were replaced with expensive ones she never asked for. The small details of her life began to reflect a lifestyle she had never imagined. It didn't feel like a sudden transformation, but rather a gradual drift away from everything she once knew. At the same time, pieces of Zayan's reality began to reveal themselves. It started with the people around him. They were not like anyone Alina had known before. Their behavior was cautious, their movements deliberate. They spoke less and watched more. There was a constant tension in the air, like something unspoken held everything together. When Zayan was present, they followed without question. When he was absent, they seemed uncertain. Then there were the patterns: late-night meetings in isolated places, sudden changes in plans, conversations that stopped the moment she entered a room. At first, she ignored these details, convincing herself that they didn't concern her. But over time, it became harder to look away. Fear began to mix with curiosity. She started to notice the reactions of others outside that circle, the way strangers stepped aside without being asked, the way shop owners avoided eye contact, the way silence followed wherever Zayan went. It wasn't respect. It was something deeper, something heavier. Alina understood then that she was standing at the edge of something dangerous. Instead of stepping back, she moved closer. Was a strange comfort in the chaos of his world. It gave her a sense of purpose, a feeling that she mattered in a way she never had before. The loneliness that once defined her life slowly disappeared, replaced by a connection that felt impossible to break. By the time the truth fully revealed itself, it no longer shocked her. She had already changed. The girl who once watched life from a distance was now standing in the middle of it, surrounded by secrets she could no longer ignore. And without realizing it, she had crossed a line that separated her past from everything she was becoming. There was no clear moment when she made the choice. The choice had been made. Change in Alina Kareem did not happen overnight. It unfolded quietly, in ways that were easy to overlook at first, but impossible to ignore with time. The softness that once defined her presence slowly disappeared, replaced by a calm, controlled demeanor. She no longer hesitated in unfamiliar situations. Instead, she observed, learned, and adapted faster than anyone expected. Being close to Zayan Malik exposed her to a world built on precision and silence. Every action had a purpose. Every mistake had consequences. At first, she stood on the edges, watching carefully, understanding how things worked without asking questions. She began to recognize patterns: who held power, who followed orders, and who was pretending to be stronger than they actually were. What made her different was how quickly she adjusted. She didn't rely on emotion. She didn't panic under pressure. When problems arose, she studied them, breaking them down until a clear solution appeared. It wasn't something she had been taught. It was something that seemed to come naturally once she allowed herself to change. Zayan noticed this before anyone else. Gradually, he began trusting her with more responsibility. At first, it was small tasks: handling information, organizing movements, making sure things stayed in order when he wasn't present. But those small tasks turned into larger roles. She became someone people reported to, someone whose decisions carried weight. The shift in power was subtle but undeniable. Those who once ignored her now paid attention. Those who doubted her quickly learned not to. There was something about her that made people uneasy. It wasn't loud or aggressive. It was the way she remained calm when others expected hesitation. It was the way she made decisions without showing doubt. Fear began to follow her, just as it followed Zayan. While he ruled through presence, Alina ruled through precision. Then came the moment that changed everything. Zayan disappeared. There was no warning, no sign of struggle, no explanation. One day he was there, controlling everything as he always had. The next, he was gone. The sudden absence sent shockwaves through the network. Confusion spread quickly, followed by tension. Without a leader, the structure began to weaken. Rivals saw an opportunity. Pressure came from all sides. Deals began to fall apart. Trust started to break. The system that once ran smoothly now felt unstable, like it could collapse at any moment. Many expected Alina to step back, to disappear like she once would have. But she didn't. She stepped forward. At first, it seemed like a temporary move, someone trying to hold things together until answers were found. But as days turned into weeks, it became clear that this was something else. She wasn't just maintaining control. She was taking it. She did it without hesitation. She reorganized operations, removed weak links, and tightened control in ways even Zayan hadn't. Her decisions were faster, sharper, and more calculated. Where others saw chaos, she saw structure. Where others hesitated, she acted. The transformation was complete. The quiet girl from the forgotten neighborhood no longer existed. In her place stood someone entirely different, someone who understood power and knew how to use it. Within months, the network stabilized under her leadership. Then it began to grow. Stronger alliances were formed, new territories were secured. The same people who once questioned her now followed without resistance. Fear and respect blended into one, creating a reputation that spread far beyond the city. No one spoke of Zayan anymore, not because they forgot, but because it no longer mattered. Alina had become something greater than anyone expected. She was no longer part of the system, she was the one controlling it. Power changed the way people looked at Alina Kareem, but it also changed the way she looked at everything around her. Trust became a weakness she could no longer afford. Every decision she made was calculated, every move carefully planned. The world she controlled was built on loyalty that could shift at any moment, and she understood better than anyone how quickly everything could fall apart. As her influence expanded, so did the stories about her. Some believed she had always been this way, hiding her true nature behind a quiet face. Others whispered that something had broken inside her the moment Zayan Malik vanished. But the most dangerous rumor was the one that refused to disappear, the idea that his disappearance was not a mystery at all at first. There was no proof, only fragments of suspicion scattered among those who had been close enough to notice the smallest details. Zayan had not shown signs of weakness before he disappeared. He had not been losing control. If anything, he had been tightening it. That alone made his sudden absence feel unnatural. Alina never addressed the rumors, she never reacted to them. Her silence only made them stronger. Over time, pieces of the truth began to surface, not through open revelations, but through quiet discoveries. A hidden ledger that didn't match previous records. A series of movements that led to nowhere. A pattern of decisions Zayan had been making in his final days, decisions that hinted at change. Not just within the network, but within his inner circle. He had been preparing to remove someone. That realization shifted everything. Those who analyzed the details began to see it clearly. Zayan had started viewing Alina not as a partner, but as a threat. Her rapid growth, her ability to influence others, her increasing control over operations, it had made her dangerous in his eyes. In a world like theirs, there was no room for equals, only control. Alina had seen it before anyone else. She had recognized the subtle signs, the shift in trust, the guarded behavior, the decisions that no longer included her. For someone like her, those changes were enough. She didn't wait for confirmation. She didn't wait for confrontation. She acted first. What happened next was never officially recorded. There were no witnesses willing to speak, no evidence strong enough to expose the truth completely, but the outcome was undeniable. Zayan Malik never returned. Alina Kareem rose without resistance. What made it even more unsettling was how clean it had been. There was no chaos, no internal collapse, no visible struggle for power. It was as if his removal had been planned down to the smallest detail, leaving no space for disruption. The system continued to function, almost as if it had been waiting for the change. Years passed, and Alina's control only grew stronger. Law enforcement agencies attempted to track her operations, but nothing ever led directly to her. Rivals tried to challenge her authority, but none succeeded. She stayed ahead of every move, always one step beyond reach. The girl who once felt invisible had become untouchable in a completely different way. Yet beneath the control and precision, there was something else, something that never fully disappeared. The memory of who she once was. It existed quietly, buried beneath layers of decisions and consequences, a reminder of a life that no longer belonged to her. But in the world she had built, there was no space for that version of herself. Alina didn't look back. She couldn't, because everything she had become was built on a single truth: survival always came before love. And in the end, that truth made her stronger than anyone who came before her. Just a leader, just a criminal, but something far more dangerous. A queen who had learned that the only way to stay in power was to trust no one and feel nothing at all.